Broken soldier saves Apache woman from evil colonel. Their secret changes. Everything the scorching Arizona sun beat down on a lonely homestead where a broken man hid from the world. But when a mysterious woman from his past arrived at his door, everything changed. What dark secret connected them? And why was a powerful railroad baron willing to kill for his land? This is a story of redemption, revenge, and the healing power of love in the Old West. If you want to hear how one man's greatest tragedy became his salvation, hit that like button and subscribe for more epic Western tales. The nightmare always began the same way. Gunfire cracking across the ridge, screams mixing with smoke from burning wagons, and those eyes, dark, terrified eyes of a child reaching for him through the chaos. Jack Mason jolted awake in the darkness, his sheets soaked with sweat despite the cool desert night. His hands trembled as he reached for the water pitcher beside his narrow bed. 3 years since he had fled to this godforsaken corner of Arizona territory. 3 years and the dream still came. Dawn crept through the cracked shutters of his adobe house, painting thin lines across the dirt floor. Another day, another chance to forget, though forgetting never came. He rose mechanically, his movements practiced from military routine that even disgrace couldn't break. Boots, shirt, the worn holster that hung by the door heavy with the army colt he'd kept after everything ended. Outside, the desert stretched endlessly beneath a sky already turning from gray to harsh blue. Jack paused on his porch, scanning the horizon as he did every morning. Nothing but sage rock formations and distant mountains. No movement except a hawk circling high above. The homestead was small, a 2-room house, a lean-to barn, and most importantly, the well. 8 feet wide, stone-lined, impossibly deep. The previous owner had died defending it from claim jumpers, leaving behind only this hole that somehow held sweet, cool water year-round. Without that well, this patch of desert would be worthless. With it, Jack could survive alone, which was all he wanted. To be left alone with his ghosts and his shame. The sound of his boots on packed earth echoed in the morning stillness as he crossed to the well. The ritual never changed. Lowered, the bucket listened for the splash far below, haul it up hand over hand. The water that emerged was always cold and always clear, as if it came from some vast underground river that knew nothing of the desert above. Jack stared at his reflection in the bucket. A face that had once been called handsome now bore deep lines around gray eyes that had seen too much. His dark hair, regulation short for so long, had grown shaggy. The beard he'd never been allowed in uniform now covered old scars. He looked like what he was, a man running from something that would never stop chasing him. The morning chores provided structure. Feed the 2 chickens that somehow survived on scorpion hunting. Check on his horse, sergeant at a sturdy Mustang, who'd carried him through his final shameful days in uniform. Patch the endless cracks in the adobe walls. By noon, the sun had become a hammer, driving him into the shade of the house. He sat at his rough table, cleaning his rifle, a Spencer repeating rifle from his cavalry days. His hands moved automatically, finding comfort in the familiar task. That's when he heard them. Hoofbeats. Multiple riders approaching fast. Jack was at the window, instantly, rifle in hand. Through the heat shimmer, he counted 4 riders. 3 men in the lead, pursuing a 4th figure on a smaller horse that was clearly foundering. As they drew closer, Jack's breath caught. The pursued rider was a woman, her long dark hair streaming behind her arm. She rode with desperate skill, but her mount was failing, foam dripping from its mouth. The 3 men were gaining. Jack could see their weapons drawn, hear their shouts carrying across the desert. The woman's horse stumbled, nearly going down. She managed to keep her seat, but the animal was done. Jack didn't think. He moved. The Spencer rifle spoke once, kicking up dust directly in front of the lead pursuer. The man hauled back onto his reins, his companions doing the same. They'd heard that distinctive Spencer crack 7 shots without reloading. A soldier's weapon. "That's far enough," Jack called out, stepping onto his porch, rifle steady. The woman had reached his property line. Her horse collapsed just inside its sides, heaving. She rolled clear with practiced grace, then surprised Jack by producing a small pistol from her skirts, covering the men, even as she gasped for breath. "This ain't your concern, mister," the lead rider called out. He was big-bearded with corporal stripes on what looked like surplus cavalry gear. "That woman's a thief and worse. She's coming with us soon." "She's on my land now," Jack replied, not lowering the Spencer. "That makes it my concern." The second man, thin with dead eyes, spoke up. You don't know who you're crossing, friend. Colonel Prescott don't take kindly to interference. Jack felt ice in his veins at that name. Colonel William Prescott, his former commander. The man who'd ordered him to burn that Apache village, women and children included. The man whose order Jack had refused, leading to desertion charges and the destruction of his life. I know exactly who Prescott is, Jack said quietly. And I know what kind of men do his dirty work. You've got 10 seconds to turn around. The third man, younger than the others, shifted nervously. Come on, Wade, he's got position and a Spencer. The colonel can send more men later. Wade, the leader, spat tobacco juice. This ain't over, deserter. The way he said it told Jack they knew exactly who he was. The colonel's gonna want to hear about this. And you, he pointed at the woman, you can't run forever. They wheeled their horses and rode off dust clouds, marking their retreat. Jack waited until they were specks on the horizon before lowering his rifle. The woman had risen to her feet, still holding her small pistol. Up close, Jack could see she was younger than he'd first thought, maybe 25. Her features held both Apache and Mexican heritage, creating a striking beauty despite the yust and exhaustion. Her dress, though torn and travel-stained, showed quality in its fabric and cut. Thank you, she said, her English accented but clear. Then surprisingly, she added, Captain Mason. Jack stiffened. I'm not a captain. Not anymore. No, she agreed, studying him with dark, intelligent eyes. But you were once. The captain who refused to murder children. She lowered her pistol slowly. I am Maria Santos, and I think we have a common enemy. The name stirred something in Jack's memory. Santos. There had been a Santos at the massacre Prescott had ordered, the one Jack had refused to participate in. A Mexican trader who'd married into the Apache band. He'd been killed trying to protect your father, Jack said slowly. Miguel Santos. He died at Skeleton Canyon. Maria's expression hardened. Murdered, along with my mother's people, while trying to protect the children. She met his gaze directly. The children you tried to save by warning the village. The warning that came too late. The weight of that day crashed over Jack anew. He'd sent a rider to warn the village, then refused the direct order to lead the attack. But Prescott had simply assigned another officer, Lieutenant Brooks, eager for glory. The warning had arrived only minutes before the cavalry. Not enough time. How do you know about the warning? Jack asked. My cousin survived. She saw the rider, heard his words, saw the cavalry coming shortly after. Maria's voice carried old pain wrapped in steel. You tried. That is more than anyone else did. Jack turned away, unable to bear what might be gratitude in her tone. I failed. 43 people died. Yes, Maria said simply, but you lost everything trying to save them. Your commission, your honor, your future. That matters. Her horse made a sound, part wheeze, part groan. Jack moved to the animal, running experienced hands over its legs and chest. He's done for. Ran to death. He drew his revolver, met Maria's eyes. She nodded, turning away as he ended the animal's suffering with a single shot. You can't stay here, Jack said, holstering the weapon. Prescott will send more men. I have nowhere else to go, Maria replied. He's destroyed everything. My family's trading post burned. My uncle's ranch seized for unpaid taxes. Everyone who helped me threatened or worse. She straightened, pride overcoming exhaustion. I will not run anymore. Jack recognized the tone, the sound of someone who'd decided to make a stand, consequences be damned. He'd used that same tone when refusing Prescott's order. What does he want with you specifically? Jack asked. Maria's hand moved unconsciously to a leather pouch hanging from her neck. My mother was a curandera, a healer. She knew things, secret things, including the location of something Prescott wants very badly. What? Water, Maria said simply. A vast underground river that flows beneath this desert. The kind of water that could turn thousands of acres into an empire, or supply a railroad. She looked at Jack's well. Your well touches its edge. That's why it never runs dry. Jack felt the pieces clicking together. That's why Prescott's here. Not just the railroad contracts, the water rights. Yes, and he believes I have my mother's map, the one that shows all the access points. Maria's smile was bitter. He's right, but I burned it. The knowledge is only here now. She touched her temple. Before Jack could respond, Sergeant whinnied from the lean-to his warning call. More riders approaching this time from the east. Many more, Sean. Jack grabbed Maria's arm, guiding her toward the house. Inside, there's a rifle above the door. You know how to use it. Yes. Then get ready. This is about to get complicated. The dust cloud resolved into a full squad of riders, 8 men in mixed civilian and military gear. At their head rode a figure Jack recognized even at a distance. Tall ramrod straight in the saddle, silver hair gleaming beneath a black hat. Colonel William Prescott. Retired from the army, but not from ambition. The man who'd built a shadow empire on blood and broken treaties. Jack stepped onto his porch, Spencer rifle cradled in his arms. Not quite aimed, but ready. Prescott raised a gloved hand, bringing his men to a halt just outside comfortable shooting range. Smart. He rode forward alone, stopping 20 feet from the porch. Captain Mason, Prescott said, his cultured Boston accent unchanged by years in the territories. Or should I say Mr. Mason, since you threw away your commission? Colonel, Jack replied, offering nothing more. Prescott's pale eyes, the color of winter ice, studied him. You look well for a man living like a hermit. The desert suits you, all that emptiness. Nothing to remind you of your failures. What do you want? Direct as always. Prescott smiled, the expression never reaching his eyes. I want the woman you're harboring. She's a thief and a murderer. Killed one of my men in Tucson. In self-defense, Maria's voice came from the doorway. She stood there with Jack's spare rifle barrel, visible but not threatening. After he tried to force himself on me. Prescott's smile widened. Who would believe that a half-breed woman killing a white man, the courts would hang you within a week? Your courts, Jack said, bought and paid for. All courts are bought by someone, Captain. The only question is, by whom? Prescott shifted in his saddle leather, creaking. But I'm feeling generous. Give me the woman and I'll forget you're harboring a fugitive. You can go back to your existence here. Known him, the word hung in the desert air like a challenge. Prescott's expression hardened. You always were stupidly noble. It's what destroyed you before. It'll destroy you again. Maybe, Jack said, but at least I can sleep at night. Can you? Prescott's voice turned mocking. Do the faces of those 43 dead Apache help you sleep? The children who burned because you failed to stop me. Jack's finger found the trigger. Get off my land. Your land, Prescott laughed. Oh, my dear Captain. You might want to check your property deed. There seems to be some confusion about the exact boundaries, especially regarding water rights. He pulled a document from his coat, holding it up. A territorial judge has agreed to review the original survey. Hearings in 2 weeks. Until then, he gestured to his men, I'll be ensuring no evidence is destroyed or witnesses disappear. You mean you'll be camping on my doorstep? Public land according to this injunction. We have every right to ensure the safety of the territory's resources. Prescott's smile returned. Of course, all this unpleasantness could be avoided. The woman for your land free and clear. Forever. Maria stepped fully onto the porch. I'll die before I help you. That can be arranged, Prescott said coldly. Then to Jack, you have 24 hours to reconsider. After that, well, deserters sometimes have accidents. Remote places like this, anything could happen. He turned his horse with military precision and rode back to his men. Within an hour, they'd set up camp just beyond what Jack considered his property line, close enough to watch every move, far enough to claim they weren't trespassing. As the sun set, painting the desert in shades of blood and gold, Jack stood at his well, staring into its dark depths. Maria joined him, moving silently despite her exhaustion. You didn't have to do this, she said quietly. Yes, I did. Jack hauled up a bucket of water, the rope rough against his palms. I've been running for 3 years, hiding, pretending that if I disappeared enough, the past would stop mattering. And now, he looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. Beneath the dust and weariness, he saw strength forged in lost pride that refused to break despite everything taken from her. He saw someone who'd fought alone for too long. Now I remember why I put on the uniform in the first place, to protect people from men like Prescott. So Maria was quiet for a moment, then said, The underground river, it's real. My mother showed me the signs when I was young. How to read the land, feel the water beneath. She touched the well's stone rim. This well is just the beginning. There's enough water down there to turn this whole valley into paradise, or to make someone very rich and powerful. Prescott doesn't care about paradise. No, he cares about empire, about controlling what everyone needs to survive. She turned to face him. But he's wrong about one thing. I didn't burn the map. Jack's eyebrows rose. Maria pulled the leather pouch from her neck, opening it carefully. Inside, folded into an impossibly small square, was a piece of treated deerskin covered in symbols Apache Mexican and something older. This shows every access point for 50 miles, she said. Every place the river comes close enough to surface. In the right hands, it could save this territory. In Prescott's, she didn't need to finish. Why show me? Because you chose to stand when you could have surrendered. Again. She refolded the map carefully. And because I can't do this alone anymore. That night they sat at Jack's rough table, planning by lamplight, while Prescott's campfires glowed like predatory eyes in the darkness. He'll move before the hearing, Jack said with certainty. Legal routes are just for show. When they fail, he'll use force. He has 8 men. You have 1 rifle. I have more than that. Jack stood moving to a trunk he hadn't opened in 3 years. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, lay his cavalry uniform. Beneath it, something that made Maria's eyes widen, a collection of military medals, including the Medal of Honor. You were decorated before Skeleton Canyon for actions against Confederate raiders. His voice was flat. Prescott put me up for it. Ironic, isn't it? But Maria was looking at something else in the trunk, a stack of letters tied with ribbon. My wife, Jack said quietly. She died of fever 2 years before Skeleton Canyon. Our son, too. Maybe that's why I couldn't follow Prescott's order. I'd already lost everything that mattered. Couldn't be part of taking that from others. Maria touched his arm gently. I'm sorry. Don't be, it was a long time ago. But his eyes said otherwise. They were interrupted by movement outside. Jack moved to the window, peering through a crack. One of Prescott's men was approaching the well bucket in hand. Bold of them, Maria murmured, testing boundaries. Jack opened the door, stepping out. That's far enough. The man weighed from the afternoon's pursuit, grinned insolently. Just need some water. You wouldn't deny a thirsty man water, would you? Get water from town, or dig your own well. Now that's not very Christian of you, Captain. Jack drew his revolver in one smooth motion, firing into the ground at Wade's feet. The man jumped back, cursing. Next one goes in your knee, Jack said calmly. Tell Prescott he can try all the games he wants. This well stays mine. Wade retreated, but his parting look promised retribution. Inside, Maria was loading the rifles, checking ammunition. How long since you've fought? 3 years, 4 months, 18 days. Jack replied without thinking, then caught her knowing look. I keep track of time since Skeleton Canyon. And before that, 15 years of fighting. Confederate raiders, Comancheros, Apache warriors. He paused. I was good at it. Too good. Started to like it too much. Maybe that's why I finally said no, scared of what I was becoming. Maria finished with the rifles, then surprised him by saying, I killed my first man when I was 16. Bandits attacked our trading post. My father was away. My mother tried to reason with them. Her voice hardened. I learned that day that reasoning only works when both sides are reasonable. How many since then? 4, all in self-defense. All Prescott's men one way or another. She met his gaze. Does that disturb you? No, Jack said honestly. It tells me you're a survivor, and that's what we need to be. They spent the rest of the night preparing, filling every container with water in case Prescott tried to poison the well, hiding the precious map, planning escape routes if things went badly. As dawn approached, Jack stood watch while Maria slept fitfully on his bed. He'd insisted taking the floor himself, but sleep eluded him. Instead, he found himself thinking about the strange turns of fate that had brought them together. 3 years of isolation ended in a single day. 3 years of running from his past only to have it right up to his door. But also, and this thought surprised him, 3 years of emptiness suddenly filled with purpose again. When the first light touched the eastern mountains, it illuminated a changed landscape. Prescott's camp had grown overnight. More tents, more men. Jack counted at least 15 now. He's bringing in reinforcements, Maria said, joining him at the window. She'd washed the dust from her face, revealing smooth brown skin marked by a thin scar along her left cheekbone. "Where's that from?" Jack asked, indicating the scar. "Prescott's interrogation techniques," she said simply. "When he first captured me 2 months ago, I escaped, but not unmarked." Rage flared in Jack's chest, hot, sudden, and familiar. The same rage he'd felt seeing the burned village, the dead children. The rage that had made him put his gun to Lieutenant Brooks' head before other officers pulled him off. "Easy," Maria said, reading his expression. "Save it for when we need it." "You sound like you have a plan." "I do, but you won't like it." Before she could explain, dust clouds appeared on the northern horizon. More riders, but these moved differently than military men. As they approached, Jack recognized the lead figure, Thomas Brennan, who owned the neighboring ranch 5 miles north. With him rode his 3 sons and several hands. They stopped at Prescott's camp first. Jack could see heated discussion, Prescott gesturing angrily. Then Brennan's group rode on directly to Jack's house. "Mason, Brennan called out, his weathered face friendly despite the circumstances. "Heard you might be having some trouble." Jack stepped onto the porch, aware of Prescott's men watching. "Tom, didn't expect to see you." "Well, when word gets out that Prescott's trying to steal another man's water, folks take notice, especially those of us who depend on wells ourselves." Brennan dismounted, his sons following. "Mind if we water our horses?" "Help yourself." As the horses drank, Brennan moved closer. "That really her?" "The woman Prescott's been hunting." "Oh, Maria Santos." She introduced herself, joining them. Brennan tipped his hat. "Ma'am, your father was a good man. Traded with him many times." His expression hardened. "What Prescott did to your family's trading post was criminal." "Among other things," Maria agreed. "Here's the thing, Mason," Brennan said, lowering his voice. "Prescott's been buying up water rights all along the valley, using fake surveys, intimidation, even murder when needed. But folks are getting tired of it." He glanced at his sons. "We're calling a meeting tonight. Miller's place. You should come." "Prescott won't let us leave." Brennan smiled. "Let him try to stop 30 armed ranchers. We'll escort you." He remounted, then added, "This is bigger than just your well, Mason. This is about whether free men can stand against money and corruption. About whether this territory belongs to us or to men like Prescott." After they left, Prescott himself rode over, his face tight with anger. "Making friends, Captain?" he asked coldly. "Just neighbors being neighborly," Jack replied. "Neighbors can't protect you forever, and they certainly can't change the law." "Your law," Maria said from the doorway, "bought with blood money." Prescott's eyes fixed on her with such hatred that Jack stepped between them instinctively. 12 hours remain on my offer," Prescott said. "After that, things become unpleasant." "They already are," Jack replied. That afternoon, as the sun reached its zenith, Jack made a decision. He walked to the well, aware of every eye in Prescott's camp on him. Maria followed, carrying a bucket. As she drew water, she whispered, "The meeting tonight, it's a trap." "What?" "Think about it. Prescott let Brennan come here. Let him deliver that message. He wants us to leave, to be caught on the road after dark." Jack considered this. She was right. It was exactly the kind of tactical move Prescott would make. "So we don't go." "Oh, we go," Maria smiled grimly, "but not how he expects." The sun was setting when Maria revealed her plan. "There's an old Apache trail," she said, sketching in the dust with a stick. "It runs through Skeleton Ridge, comes out behind Miller's ranch. My mother showed it to me years ago." Jack studied the crude map. "That's through the worst badlands in the territory. At night it'd be suicide. Not if you know the markers. Not if you can read the land the way my people do." She met his gaze. "Do you trust me?" It was a simple question that carried enormous weight. Trust. Something Jack hadn't given anyone in 3 years. Something that had died with his family, been buried completely at Skeleton Canyon. "Yes," he said, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. They prepared carefully. Jack saddled Sergeant while Maria packed provisions and ammunition. As full darkness fell, they made a show of lighting lamps inside the house, creating shadows that suggested movement within. Then, using the cover of the barn, they slipped out through a hidden gap in the back wall. Jack had created it years ago, an escape route he'd hoped never to use. The desert at night was a different world. Sounds carried differently, the distant yip of coyotes, the rustle of nocturnal hunters. The moon was only a sliver, providing just enough light to see shapes but not details. Maria moved with confidence, reading signs invisible to Jack. A white rock here, a bent Joshua tree there. She led them through arroyos and around mesas, always staying off skylines where they might be silhouetted. 2 hours in, Jack heard horses behind them. Sound carried far in the desert night, and these riders weren't trying to be quiet. "Prescott's men," he whispered. "Let them come," Maria replied. "They don't know this land." She led them into a narrow canyon, its walls rising like black curtains against the stars. The horses' hooves echoed despite their efforts at silence. Behind them, the pursuit sounds grew closer. Then Maria did something unexpected. She stopped, dismounted, and pulled something from her pack, a small clay pot. "Apache fire," she explained, adding dried plants to the pot. "Creates smoke that burns the eyes and throat. Won't kill, but it'll stop them." She lit the mixture with a lucifer match, then placed it strategically where the canyon narrowed. Within moments, thick, acrid smoke began filling the passage. They heard cursing, coughing horses, refusing to advance. By the time Prescott's men found another route, Jack and Maria were miles ahead. Miller's ranch appeared ahead like an oasis of light. Dozens of horses stood in the yard, and through the windows, Jack could see the gathered ranchers. They entered through the back, Maria's knock in a specific pattern, gaining them entry. The room fell silent as they appeared. Besides Thomas Brennan and his sons, Jack recognized faces from across the valley. Sam Miller, whose ranch was the largest. Frank Patterson, who ran the general store in Salvation Creek. Even Judge Harlan McCready, old and bent, but still sharp-eyed. "Mason," Miller greeted him, then nodded respectfully to Maria. "Ma'am, glad you could make it." "Prescott's men tried to follow," Jack said. "Maria lost them in the Badlands." Appreciative murmurs ran through the room. The Apache knowledge that many had once feared was now protecting them. Judge McCready stood leaning heavily on his cane. "Let's get to business. Prescott's using false surveys to claim water rights throughout the valley. He's got judges in Tucson backing him, but I still have some influence in Phoenix." "Influence won't stop bullets," Patterson said grimly. 3 ranchers who opposed him are already dead. All accidents, of course. "Which is why we need to be smarter," Brennan said. "Mason, that well of yours, it's the key. Prescott needs it to control the whole water system." Maria stepped forward. "It's more than that." She looked at Jack, who nodded permission. "There's an underground river. Vast, enough water for everyone forever. My mother knew its course. I know it too." The room erupted in excited conversation. McCready raised his hand for silence. "Young woman, are you certain?" Maria pulled out the deerskin map, unfolding it on Miller's table. The men gathered around, studying the symbols and markings. "This is Apache writing," someone said suspiciously. "And Mexican," Maria added, "and something older. The 3 peoples who knew this land before any of us arrived." She traced a line with her finger. "The river runs here beneath the valley. Jack's well touches it here. But there are other access points." "On whose land?" Miller asked shrewdly. Maria pointed to several locations. "Some on federal land, some on your properties, and some," she indicated a large area on land Prescott's already claimed through false deeds. "Son of a bitch has been planning this for years," Patterson spat. "The question," Judge McCready said slowly, "is what do we do about it?" "We fight," Jack said, speaking for the first time since revealing the map. Everyone turned to him. "Not with guns, not unless we have to, but we fight smart. Use the law against him." "How?" Miller asked. Jack looked at the judge. "You said you have influence in Phoenix. Can you get a territorial marshal here?" "Someone Prescott hasn't bought." McCready nodded slowly. "Perhaps. Marshal Daniels is an honest man, but it would take weeks." "Then we hold out for weeks," Jack said. "Together. No one stands alone against Prescott anymore." "That's asking a lot," someone said. "We all have families, responsibilities." Maria spoke up. "Prescott killed my family. Destroyed everything we built. He'll do the same to each of you one by one unless you stand together now." Her words carried the weight of lived tragedy. The room fell silent. Finally, Miller spoke. She's right, and Mason's right. We make our stand. He looked around the room. All in favor. One by one, hands rose. Not all, but most. Enough. They spent the next hours planning. Guard rotations for Jack's well. Legal strategies with Judge McCready. Supply lines to ensure no one could be starved out. As the meeting broke up, Brennan approached Jack privately. That woman of yours, she's something special. She's not my woman, Jack said quickly. Brennan smiled knowingly. Maybe not yet, but I see how you look at her and how she looks at you when you're not watching. Before Jack could respond, one of Brennan's sons burst in. Riders coming, lots of them. They rushed outside. In the distance, torches flickered like angry stars. At least 30 riders moving fast toward Miller's ranch. Prescott, Jack said grimly. He knew we'd be here. Inside, Miller shouted, women and children to the root cellar. But Maria didn't move. She stood beside Jack, checking her rifle. I don't hide, she said simply. The riders surrounded the ranch, their torches creating a ring of fire. Prescott rode forward, but this time he wasn't alone. Beside him rode a man in a federal marshal's badge. Marshal Thompson, Judge McCready said, his voice heavy with disappointment. I didn't know you were in Prescott's pocket. I uphold the law, Judge, Thompson replied. And the law says these people are harboring a fugitive. He pointed at Maria. She's wanted for murder in Tucson. It was self-defense, Jack said. That's for a court to decide. I'm here to arrest her. Thompson's hand rested on his pistol. Anyone interfering will be charged with obstruction. The ranchers looked at each other uncertainly. Fighting Prescott was one thing. Fighting a federal marshal, even a corrupt one, was another. Maria stepped forward before anyone could stop her. I'll come peacefully, she said. On one condition, a fair trial in Phoenix with Judge McCready presiding. Thompson laughed. You don't make conditions, half-breed. The slur snapped something in Jack. He moved between Maria and the marshal. She's under my protection. Your protection, Prescott spoke for the first time, his voice dripping satisfaction. A deserter's protection means nothing. Thompson's expression changed. Deserter. Captain Jack Mason, Prescott said loudly enough for all to hear, deserted his post during action against hostiles, a capital offense. Jack felt the mood shift. Some of these ranchers were veterans themselves. Desertion was the ultimate military shame. Tell them why, Maria said suddenly, her voice carrying clearly. Tell them what action you deserted from. Jack hesitated, then straightened. I refused an order to massacre an Apache village, women and children. I refused, and when they tried to carry it out anyway, I attempted to stop them. By threatening superior officers, Prescott added, by abandoning his men in hostile territory. By trying to prevent murder, Jack countered. The ranchers were murmuring now, uncertainty replacing initial judgment. Judge McCready stepped forward, his aged frame trembling, but his voice strong. I remember that incident, the Skeleton Canyon Massacre, 43 civilians dead. He looked at Prescott with undisguised contempt. You were the commanding officer, weren't you, Colonel? I was following orders from General Crook to pacify hostiles. Children aren't hostiles, Maria said, her voice cutting. My 7-year-old cousin wasn't hostile when your men shot her. Enough, Thompson said. None of this changes the current situation. The woman comes with us. Mason, you're under military arrest. Military arrest? McCready laughed bitterly. You're not military, Thompson. And Mason was never court-martialed, just administratively discharged. You have no authority here. I have this authority, Papa, Thompson said, drawing his gun. 30 rifles being cocked simultaneously sounded like bones breaking. Every rancher had armed themselves, all aimed at Prescott's men. You fire that weapon, Miller said calmly, and you won't leave this yard alive. Federal marshal or not. The tension stretched taut as wire. Jack could see Prescott calculating weighing options. His men were outnumbered, but they were professional fighters. The ranchers were tough, but not soldiers. It was Maria who broke the standoff in a way no one expected. She began to sing. It was an Apache death song, her voice rising and falling in haunting melody. The sound seemed to come from the earth itself, carrying grief and defiance in equal measure. Even the horse's stilled ears pricked forward. When she finished, she spoke in Apache, then translated. The earth remembers all blood spilled upon it. The water knows all tears shed beside it. Those who bring death will find death. Those who bring life will find life. One of Prescott's men, younger than the others, crossed himself. Another shifted nervously in his saddle. Apache curse, someone whispered. Superstitious nonsense. Prescott snapped, but Jack noticed even he looked unsettled. Maria pulled something from her pouch, a small vial of water. From the sacred river, she said, the one that flows beneath us all. She poured it onto the ground. Where it touched, despite the darkness, wildflowers began to bloom. It was impossible. Jack knew it was impossible. Desert wildflowers didn't bloom at night, didn't grow in seconds. But there they were, white petals glowing faintly in the torchlight. Which, Thompson breathed, his gun hand shaking. No, Maria said calmly. Just someone who understands this land better than you ever will. She looked at Prescott. You want the water? You want the map? Then face me in the old way. Single combat. If you win, I'll give you everything. If I win, you leave this valley forever. Prescott laughed. I don't fight women. Then choose a champion, as will I. She turned to Jack. Will you stand for me? Jack didn't hesitate. Yes. This is ridiculous, Thompson protested. We're not in medieval times. No, Judge McCready said thoughtfully, but we are in the territories where sometimes the old ways still hold legal weight. Trial by combat is recognized in certain circumstances. You're joking. Check the Tarrant Statutes, Book 7 of Section 12, written to accommodate native customs. The judge smiled grimly. I should know, I helped write them. Prescott was trapped. To refuse would be cowardice in front of his men. To accept meant risking everything on a single fight. Wade, he said finally, you'll champion me. The big bearded man who'd led the chase earlier grinned and dismounted. With pleasure, Colonel. Dawn, Maria said. Here, let everyone see. Agreed, Prescott said, but when you lose, you both hang. They returned to Jack's homestead under heavy escort, not arrested but not free either. Prescott's men surrounded the property while Jack and Maria were allowed inside to prepare. You didn't have to do that, Jack said once they were alone. Yes, I did. Maria was checking his wounds from earlier scuffles, her touch gentle but clinical. This was always going to end in blood. At least this way, it's limited blood. Wade's dangerous, former Army like most of Prescott's men, and he enjoys killing. While you don't, Maria observed, that's your advantage. He fights for pleasure and money. You fight for purpose. She was standing close enough that Jack could smell the sage and something sweeter in her hair. Their eyes met and held. I won't let you down, he said. I know. Her hand touched his face briefly, a gesture that carried more intimacy than any kiss. You're not that kind of man. They spent the night in preparation. Jack cleaned and checked his weapons while Maria prepared something from her medicine pouch, a salve she rubbed into his hands and arms. For speed and strength, she explained. My mother's recipe. Does it work? Do the flowers growing from dry earth work? She smiled slightly. Some things don't need explanation, just faith. As dawn approached, neither had slept. They sat together at the table, sharing the comfortable silence of two people who understood each other without words. If something goes wrong, Jack began, it won't. But if it does, the map, the water rights, are meaningless without someone to protect them. Maria's hand covered his. Jack, I need to tell you something about Skeleton Canyon. He tensed. My brother was there, she said quietly, fighting with the warriors who tried to defend the village. Jack's blood went cold. Maria. He died, shot by soldiers following Prescott's orders. She squeezed his hand. But before he died, he saw you. Saw you trying to stop it. Saw you strike Lieutenant Brooks when he wouldn't call off the attack. How do you know this? My cousin, the one who survived, she was hiding nearby. She saw everything. Maria's eyes glistened with unshed tears. My brother's last words were about the soldier who tried to save them, who fought his own men to protect Apache children. Jack felt something break inside him, a wall he'd built around that day crumbling. I failed. I didn't save anyone. You saved your soul, Maria said firmly, And that's why I came looking for you, Jack Mason. Not just because we have a common enemy, but because you're the kind of man who would destroy his life rather than destroy innocence. Before Jack could respond, the sun touched the eastern mountains. It was time. The yard between Jack's house and barn had been cleared, a rough circle drawn in the dust. Half the valley seemed to have arrived overnight. Ranchers, townspeople, even some Apache who materialized from the desert like ghosts. Wade stood in the circle, stripped to the waist, revealing a body marked by scars and muscle. He carried a cavalry saber and a pistol. "Your choice of weapons," Judge McCready announced, acting as official witness. Jack removed his coat and shirt, aware of the gasps from some spectators. His own body carried its history, saber scars, bullet wounds, the physical testament to 15 years of fighting. "Pistol and knife," Jack said. Wade laughed. "Knife against sword, your funeral deserter." They entered the circle from opposite sides. Prescott watched from horseback, his expression confident. Maria stood with the ranchers, her face composed but her hands clenched. "First blood or death," McCready announced. "Begin." Wade attacked immediately, the saber whistling through air where Jack's head had been. Jack rolled aside, coming up with his knife extended testing distance. Wade was good trained, experienced, brutal. His blade work was textbook cavalry efficient and deadly. But Jack had learned to fight from Apache scouts, Mexican vaqueros, and Texas Rangers. His style was unpredictable. They circled, testing each other. Wade's saber had reach, but Jack's knife was faster. The pistols remained holstered, in unspoken agreement that this would be decided by blades. Wade lunged a perfect thrust that should have skewered Jack through the heart. But Jack twisted the blade, passing inches from his ribs, and his knife opened a red line across Wade's sword arm. "First blood," someone shouted. "First blood, be damned," Wade snarled. "This is to the death." He attacked with renewed fury, the saber creating a web of steel that drove Jack back. The tip caught Jack's shoulder, opening a gash that immediately soaked his arm with blood. The crowd murmured. Even drawn wounds now. Jack shifted the knife to his left hand, his right arm weakening. Wade saw the opening and pressed his advantage, driving Jack toward the circle's edge. That's when Jack heard Maria's voice, soft but clear. "The earth remembers." Wade's next thrust hit the exact spot where Maria had poured the sacred water the night before, where the impossible flowers had bloomed. His foot slipped slightly, just enough to throw off his balance. Jack moved inside the saber's arc, his knife finding the gap between ribs. Not a killing thrust, he pulled it at the last second, but deep enough to drop Wade to his knees. "Yield," Jack said, knife at Wade's throat. Wade spat blood. "Go to hell." "Yield or die, your choice." For a moment it seemed Wade would choose death. Then, perhaps seeing something in Jack's eyes, the certainty of a man who'd killed before and would again if necessary, he dropped the saber. "I yield." The crowd erupted. Maria ran to Jack, catching him as his legs buckled from blood loss. Her hands pressed against his shoulder wound, the mysterious salve she'd prepared already working to slow the bleeding. Prescott dismounted, his face purple with rage. "This proves nothing, a barbaric display that was conducted according to territorial law," Judge McCready interrupted. "Witnessed by dozens. The terms were clear. You lost, Colonel. Time to honor the agreement." "I agreed to nothing. Your champion did, your chosen representative." McCready smiled coldly. "Or are you saying you have no honor to uphold?" The crowd was pressing closer now, their mood ugly. These were people who'd suffered under Prescott's schemes, who'd lost land and water to his manipulations. Only his hired guns kept them at bay, and even those men looked uncertain. Marshal Thompson stepped forward. "Colonel, perhaps it's time to withdraw. Regroup. There are other legal channels." "Legal channels?" Prescott's composure finally cracked completely. "I own the legal channels. I own the judges, the politicians, everything that matters in this territory." "Not everything," Maria said, still supporting Jack. "You don't own the water, you don't own the land, and you don't own us." She pulled out the deerskin map, holding it high for all to see. "This shows where the water runs, where wells can be dug. There's enough for everyone, ranchers, farmers, towns, even your railroad colonel. But only if we share it." "Share," Prescott laughed bitterly. "Share with savages and traitors." That word, savages, rippled through the crowd. The Apache observers stirred hands moving to weapons. The Mexican families present muttered angrily. Even some of the white ranchers looked offended. The only savage here, Jack said, forcing himself to stand despite his wounds, is the man who would murder children for profit, who burns trading posts and steals land from widows, who corrupts everything he touches. He looked at Thompson. Marshal, I'm prepared to answer for my actions at Skeleton Canyon, in a proper court with proper witnesses. Are you prepared to arrest Colonel Prescott for the murders of the Santos family, for the burning of their trading post, for the numerous accidents that befell ranchers who opposed him? Thompson shifted uncomfortably. That would require evidence. I have evidence, Judge McCready said. Sworn statements, documents, enough to convene a grand jury. The moment balanced on a knife's edge, violence hovering like heat shimmer waiting to erupt. Then, from the crowd of Apache observers, an old woman stepped forward, ancient, bent with age, but her eyes sharp as obsidian. She spoke in Apache, her voice carrying despite its frailness. Maria translated. She says she remembers. She was at Skeleton Canyon. She saw the soldier who tried to save the children. The old woman pointed a gnarled finger at Jack. She says the spirits of the dead do not blame him. They blame the one who gave the orders. Her finger moved to Prescott. She says the earth is tired of drinking blood for this man's ambition. The water will not flow for him, the land will not bloom. He is cursed to watch others prosper while he withers. Prescott's hand went to his gun. Enough of this nonsense. 30 rifles swung toward him. His own men, seeing the odds, stepped back. It's over, William, a new voice said. Everyone turned. Riding in from the east was a full company of cavalry guidons, flapping in the morning breeze. At their head rode General George Crook himself, the famous Indian fighter, his distinctive beard forked in gray. General, Prescott said, his voice uncertain. What brings you here? Reports of unauthorized military action, use of Army resources for private gain, and some very interesting letters from Judge McCready about the real events at Skeleton Canyon. Crook dismounted, his movements stiff but purposeful. He looked at Jack, taking in the wounds, the defensive stance, Maria's protective presence beside him. Captain Mason, Crook said formally, I owe you an apology. The yard went silent. I believed Colonel Prescott's version of events, that you'd lost your nerve, abandoned your post. I was wrong. He pulled a document from his coat. This is a full presidential pardon for any charges related to Skeleton Canyon. And this, another document, is your official reinstatement to the Army if you want it, with promotion to major. Jack felt Maria's hand tighten on his arm. He looked at her, seeing the question in her eyes. Then at the gathered people ranchers who'd risked everything to stand with him, Apache, who'd emerged from hiding to bear witness, townspeople who just wanted to live free from fear. Thank you, General, Jack said clearly, but my place is here now. Crook nodded, perhaps having expected this answer. He turned to Prescott. Colonel, you're under arrest. Conduct unbecoming an officer misuse of military resources. Conspiracy to defraud the government regarding land grants. You can't. I can, and I am. Crook gestured to his troops. Take him. As soldiers moved to arrest Prescott, he made one last desperate play. His gun cleared leather, swinging toward Maria, the source of all his failures. 3 shots rang out simultaneously. Jack's from the pistol he'd never drawn during the fight with Wade. Maria's from the small gun she'd kept hidden. And from the crowd fired by the old Apache woman's grandson, a young warrior who'd been watching everything with burning eyes. Prescott felt the gun dropping from nerveless fingers. He looked down at the spreading red across his chest, then at Maria. The map, he gasped. At least destroy the map. Don't let them. Let them what? Maria knelt beside him. Let them share the water. Let them prosper together. Let them prove that different peoples can build something better than your empire theft. Prescott's eyes were already glazing. Savages, he whispered. No, Jack said quietly. Just people trying to live free. Prescott died as the sun fully cleared the mountains, his blood soaking into the same earth where Maria's sacred water had made flowers bloom. The aftermath of violence always brought a strange quiet, Jack knew. Like the desert after a thunderstorm, everything washed clean, but somehow fragile. General Crook's men had removed Prescott's body and arrested his remaining supporters. Marshall Thompson, revealed to have taken over $30,000 in bribes, was led away in chains. Wade and the other hired guns were given a choice trial or exile. Most chose to ride out and never return. Jack sat on his porch, shoulder bandaged, watching as people gradually dispersed. The crisis that had brought them together was over, but something had fundamentally changed in the valley. Barriers that had existed between white and Mexican rancher and townsman, settler and Apache had cracked, if not completely fallen. Maria emerged from the house with coffee and medical supplies. "You need proper stitches," she said, examining his shoulder wound. "Later, when everyone's gone." "Stubborn man." But she smiled as she said it. Judge McCready approached, leaning heavily on his cane, but eyes bright with satisfaction. Well, that was more excitement than these old bones expected. But justice was served in its way. "Frontier justice," Jack said. "Not exactly what they teach in law school." "Perhaps not, but effective." McCready looked at Maria. "Young woman, that map of yours, what do you intend to do with it?" Maria glanced at Jack, then made a decision. "Share it. With everyone. The water belongs to the land, not to any one person." "That's remarkably generous." "It's practical," Maria corrected. "Water hoarded becomes a source of conflict. Water shared becomes a source of community." McCready nodded approvingly. "Wisdom beyond your years." He turned to Jack. "And you, General Crook's offer of reinstatement was genuine. You could have your career back." "I had a career," Jack said, watching dust devils dance across the yard. "It nearly destroyed me. This," he gestured to the land, the well, the woman beside him, "this is a life." The judge smiled. "Indeed it is. Well, I'll leave you to it, but expect papers to sign soon. With Prescott dead and his claims invalidated, we need to properly register the water rights. Make everything legal and binding." After he left, Thomas Brennan approached with his sons. "Mason, Miss Santos, we owe you both a debt." "No debt," Jack said firmly. "We all stood together. Still, if you ever need anything." Brennan hesitated, then added, "That was brave what you did, both of you, standing up to Prescott, revealing the truth about Skeleton Canyon. It takes courage to face the past like that." "Sometimes the past won't stay buried," Jack replied, his eyes finding Maria's. "Sometimes it rides up to your door and demands a reckoning." Brennan nodded and departed, his sons tipping their hats respectfully to Maria. As the sun climbed toward noon, the yard finally emptied, except for General Crook, who dismissed his troops to camp a mile away. He approached alone, his famous forked beard catching the light. "Captain, excuse me, Mr. Mason." A word. Jack stood carefully, his wound pulling. "General?" "I meant what I said about the apology. I should have investigated more thoroughly. Should have known Prescott was capable of ordering atrocities." Crook's weathered face showed genuine regret. "You tried to do the right thing, and I let you be crucified for it." "You were fighting a war," Jack said simply. "Wars don't leave much room for nuance." "No, they don't." Crook looked at Maria. "Miss Santos, I knew your father. Traded with him often. A good man. I'm sorry for what happened to your family." "Many families suffered," Maria replied evenly. "Mine was not special in its losses." "Perhaps not, but you're special in your response. That map, that knowledge used differently, it could have made you wealthy beyond imagination." "Wealth built on others' thirst is cursed," Maria said. "My mother taught me that." Crook studied them both. "You know, the territory is changing. The old wars are ending. We need people like you, people who can bridge different worlds, different peoples. If not in the army, then in government. The territorial council, perhaps?" Jack shook his head. "I'm no politician." "Neither am I." Crook smiled ruefully. "Yet here I am playing politics with Washington, trying to make peace instead of war. Times change, Mason. Consider it." He departed, leaving Jack and Maria finally alone as the afternoon heat built. They sat together in companionable silence, the adrenaline of the past days slowly fading. "You need those stitches now," Maria said firmly. This time Jack didn't argue. Inside, she worked with practiced skill, her hands steady and sure. The intimacy of the moment, her fingers on his skin, her breath warm as she leaned close, affected them both. "Where did you learn this?" Jack asked, trying to distract himself from her nearness. "My mother. She was a healer, remember? She taught me about medicines, wounds, birth, death, all of it." Maria tied off a stitch. She said healing and harming were two sides of the same knowledge. You had to understand both to be complete. Is that why you could face Prescott? Understanding both sides? Maria paused in her work. I faced him because I had to, because running had become worse than dying. She looked up at him. You understand that? Yes, Jack said quietly. I do. She finished the stitches and applied the salve that had already proven its worth. As she worked, Jack studied her face, the strength in her jawline, the sadness that lingered in her eyes, the determination that had carried her across hostile territory to find him. Why me, he asked suddenly. Really? Not just the Skeleton Canyon connection. You could have gone anywhere, found other allies. Maria's hands stilled. Because I dreamed you. Jack blinked. What? 3 months ago, before Prescott burned our trading post, I had a fever dream. Vision, maybe. I saw a man drawing water from a well in the desert. Saw him haunted by ghosts choosing isolation over pain. Saw myself reflected in that water beside him. She met his eyes. When I heard about the hermit soldier with the miraculous well, I knew. Knew what? That our paths were meant to cross. That what was broken in you could heal what was broken in me. And perhaps the opposite. She touched the bandage she just applied. Was I wrong? Jack caught her hand, holding it gently. No, you weren't wrong. The moment stretched between them, heavy with possibility. Then Maria pulled back, practical once more. You need rest and food. When did you last eat properly? They prepared a simple meal together, moving around each other with surprising ease given the small space. As they ate, Maria unfolded her mother's map on the table. We need to copy this, she said. Multiple copies. Give them to the ranchers, the town council, even the Apache bands. Make the knowledge too widespread to suppress. That's a lot of trust, Jack observed. Trust has to start somewhere. She traced the underground river's path with her finger. Look here, and here natural wells could be dug. Not as deep as yours, but enough for small farms. And here, where the river comes closest to the surface, a town could grow. Prescott's dream, but shared instead of hoarded. Exactly. Maria looked up at him. Will you help me? You know engineering from your army days. You could plan it properly. You're staying then, Jack tried to keep his voice neutral. Maria's expression softened. If I'm welcome? You know you are. I know you're an honorable man who would offer shelter to anyone in need. That's not what I'm asking. Jack understood. She was asking for more than sanctuary. She was asking if there was a future here beyond mere survival. Maria, he began, then stopped searching for words. I don't know if I can be what you need. The War Elizabeth's death, Skeleton Canyon, they broke something in me. I'm not asking for you to be unbroken, Mitan, Maria said gently. I'm asking if we can be broken together. If we can build something new from the pieces. Before Jack could respond, Sergeant whinnied outside his warning call. They both grabbed weapons, moving to the windows. A lone rider approached, moving slowly. As he drew closer, Jack recognized him, one of the young Apache warriors who'd witnessed the morning's fight. He stopped at a respectful distance and called out in accented English, I come in peace to speak with the woman who carries the water song. Maria stepped onto the porch. They spoke in Apache, the young man's voice urgent but respectful. Finally, he handed her something, a leather pouch, similar to the one she wore, and rode away. What was that about? Jack asked. Maria's expression was stunned. The old woman who spoke this morning, she's my grandmother's sister. I didn't recognize her. It's been so many years. She sent this. She opened the pouch, revealing another map, this one painted on thin bark. It shows the sacred springs, the ones only the Apache know. Why share that with you? Because she says the time of secrets is ending, that the water is calling for unity. Maria looked at Jack. She also said something else, that the man who tried to save the children has been forgiven by the spirits, that his path forward is clear if he chooses to see it. That night, as they sat by lamplight, transcribing the maps, rain began to fall. Not the violent thunderstorms that occasionally lashed the desert, but a steady, gentle rain that soaked deep into the earth. It's too early for monsoon season, Jack said, stepping onto the porch. Maria joined him, and they stood together watching the rain transform the desert. The scent of wet sage and creosote filled the air. In the distance, lightning flickered without thunder, illuminating the mountains in brief, stark relief. The old stories say rain comes when the earth is ready to heal, Maria said softly. Jack felt something shift inside him, like ice breaking on a frozen river. The constant weight he'd carried since Skeleton Canyon didn't disappear, but it changed, became something he could bear rather than something that crushed him. Maria, he said, turning to face her, I need to tell you something. She waited patient as always. When you arrived, I was going to end things, soon. The isolation, the memories that they were winning. He swallowed hard. You saved my life simply by knocking on that door. Maria reached up, touching his face gently. We saved each other. The rain intensified, creating a curtain of water around the porch. In that private world, Jack pulled Maria close and they stood together, not kissing, not yet, but holding each other as the desert bloomed around them. Over the next weeks, the valley transformed. The rain, unusual for the season, continued intermittently. The underground river, perhaps swollen by upstream storms, rose closer to the surface. Where Maria's map indicated new springs appeared, turning dry arroyos into streams. Word spread throughout the territory. Families arrived seeking land not to steal, but to claim legitimately under the Homestead Act. The town of Salvation Creek, formerly dying, began to grow. Jack and Maria worked together, planning where wells should be dug, mediating disputes over water rights, teaching others what they'd learned about the desert's hidden resources. It wasn't always smooth. Old prejudices died hard, and some newcomers brought greed rather than cooperation. But mostly it worked. One evening, 3 months after Prescott's death, Judge McCready visited with unexpected news. The territorial government wants to officially recognize the Water Compact, he said, producing legal documents. Make it binding law that these water rights are held in common trust. No one person or company can claim them. That's wonderful, Maria said, then frowned. But why do you look troubled? Because they want you both to administer it as territorial water commissioners. It's a political appointment, comes with a salary and considerable authority. Jack and Maria exchanged glances. We're not politicians, Jack said. No, you're better. You're trusted by all sides, Apache, Mexican, Anglo. That's rare and valuable. McCready leaned forward. This is a chance to make permanent what you've started, to ensure Prescott's vision of empire never takes root again. That night, they discussed it at the well, their place for important conversations. It would mean traveling, Jack said, meetings in Phoenix dealing with bureaucrats. But also protecting what we've built, Maria countered, making sure the water stays free. Jack drew up a bucket, the rope rough and familiar, in his hands. When I came here, all I wanted was to disappear, to never matter to anyone again. And now he looked at her, this remarkable woman who'd emerged from his past to reshape his future. Now I understand that isolation isn't healing. It's just slow dying. Maria smiled. Is that your way of saying yes to the appointment? It's my way of saying yes to the future, to building something that matters. With you. The words hung between them, carrying more weight than any political appointment. Jack, Maria said softly, are you asking me something? He set down the bucket and took her hands. I'm asking if you'll build that future with me, not just as partners in this water trust, but as family, as husband and wife, if you'll have me. Maria's eyes glistened in the moonlight. You're sure I'm not Elizabeth? I can't replace what you lost. I'm not asking you to. Elizabeth was my past, and I'll always honor that. But you're my present, and I hope my future. You're the woman who rode out of the desert and brought me back to life. And you're the man who stood against an army for me, who chose justice over survival. She squeezed his hands. Yes, Jack, Mason, I'll marry you. They were married a month later at the well, surrounded by the impossible garden that had grown where the underground river had been exposed. Judge McCready officiated with Brennan and Miller as witnesses. The old Apache woman attended, giving her blessing in the ancient language. General Crook himself came, bringing an unexpected wedding gift, Jack's military pension fully restored, backdated to Skeleton Canyon. You earned it, Crook said simply. Every cent. The ceremony blended traditions, Christian vows, Apache blessings, Mexican celebrations. The entire valley attended, even former enemies, now united by water and hope. As the sun set, painting the desert in shades of gold, and rose, Jack and Maria stood together at the well, looking out at what they'd helped create. Where once there had been only survival, now there was community. Where once there had been only sand, now gardens were beginning to bloom. "Do you still have nightmares?" Maria asked quietly. "About Skeleton Canyon?" "Sometimes," Jack admitted. "But now I also dream of this, of what we're building." The nightmares have context now. They're part of a larger story, not the only story. Maria leaned against him. "My mother used to say that water always finds its way. Through rock, through the hardest ground. It's patient and persistent, and eventually it wins." "Like you," Jack said, kissing her forehead. "Like us," she corrected. 5 years passed. The valley had become unrecognizable. Where once only Jack's lone homestead stood now, a thriving community sprawled along the exposed underground river. Salvation Creek had grown into a proper town, with a school where Apache Mexican and Anglo children learned together, controversial but successful. Jack and Maria's house had expanded too, rooms added as needed. The most recent addition was a nursery where their son Miguel Thomas Mason slept. Born during a thunderstorm that brought floods to the desert, he had his mother's dark eyes and his father's stubborn chin. They sat on their expanded porch watching the sunset paint the mountains purple. Jack's hair had more gray now, and Maria had laugh lines that hadn't been there before. The weight of administration managing water rights, mediating disputes, fighting off periodic attempts by new corporations to claim the river had aged them both, but contentedly. "Letter from General Crook," Maria said, handing him the envelope that had arrived that day. Jack read it, eyebrows rising. "He's retiring, recommends me for his position overseeing territorial development. Will you accept?" Jack looked out at the thriving valley, at the children playing by the community well, at the Apache and Mexican families farming alongside Anglo settlers. "No, this is where we belong. This is what we built." Maria smiled, relief evident. "Good, because I'm pregnant again." Jack turned to her joy, replacing surprise on his weathered face. "Really? Really?" The midwife confirmed it today. He pulled her close and they sat together as stars emerged in the darkening sky. The well stood nearby, as it always had, but now it was one of many. The secret water had been freed, turning desert into garden, suspicion into community, broken people into family. "Do you ever think about how different it might have been?" Maria asked. "If I hadn't found you, if Prescott had won?" "Every day," Jack admitted. "But I've learned something. The past shapes us but doesn't define us. We define ourselves by what we choose to do with our pain." "And what did we choose?" Jack looked at his wife, his partner, his salvation. "We chose to let it make us stronger, to let it teach us compassion, to let it show us that healing comes not from isolation, but from connection." A cry came from inside Miguel, waking from his nap. Maria rose to tend to him, but paused, looking back at Jack. "That first day when I knocked on your door, were you really going to shoot?" Jack smiled, remembering the desperate woman who'd stood her ground despite exhaustion and fear. "Were you really going to leave if I'd said no?" "Never," Maria admitted. "Then I guess it's good we both chose to stay." She went inside and soon he heard her singing to their son an Apache lullaby mixed with Spanish words and English phrases. A new song for a new world they were building, one well at a time. The nightmare of Skeleton Canyon still came, sometimes would probably always come. But now it was just one dream among many. And when Jack woke, it wasn't to emptiness and isolation, but to Maria's warmth beside him, to his son's laughter, to a community that had risen from desert and determination. The well still stood at the center of it all, as it had since before Jack arrived. But now it was surrounded by life instead of loneliness, by hope instead of mere survival. Jack drew water as he had every morning for 8 years, but now the ritual had changed. The bucket he raised reflected not just his face but a full life, the children who called him Papa, the woman who'd saved him while letting him save her, the community that had grown from shared struggle and shared water. He'd once thought the well was about survival, about having just enough to continue existing. Now he understood it differently. The well was about depth, how far you were willing to go for water, for truth, for connection. How deep you could dig through the hard surface to find the flowing river beneath. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, someone would arrive at your door just when you'd given up digging. Someone who knew where the water truly ran. Someone who could teach you that the deepest wells weren't just about water, but about faith. Faith that beneath the driest desert, beneath the hardest pain, something life-giving flowed. All you had to do was keep digging, and maybe, just maybe, accept help when it was offered. The sun climbed higher, turning the desert gold. Children's voices carried from the school. The sound of hammers announced new construction. Life in all its complicated, messy, beautiful reality continued. And at the center of it all, the well remained. Not as a possession to be hoarded, but as a gift to be shared. A reminder that in the driest places, in the most broken people, water and hope could still be found. Jack carried the bucket inside where Maria was feeding Miguel, her face glowing with the secret of new life growing within her. She looked up and smiled, and in that smile was everything: forgiveness for the past, joy in the present, hope for the future. "Good morning, my love," she said. "Good morning," Jack replied, and it meant it. For the first time in longer than he could remember, it truly was a good morning. A morning where the ghost of Skeleton Canyon had faded to just one shadow among many, overwhelmed by the bright light of what they'd built together. The well had brought them together, but love had made them whole. And that, Jack thought as he kissed his wife and son, was the real miracle, not the underground river or the blooming desert or the community that had risen from nothing. The real miracle was simpler and more profound. Two broken people choosing to heal together, choosing to build rather than destroy, choosing love over fear. Outside, someone was singing, one of the Apache women drawing water from the community well. Her voice rose and fell like the desert wind, carrying ancient words into the new day. The earth remembers all blood spilled upon it. The water knows all tears shed beside it. Those who bring death will find death. Those who bring life will find life. Jack had brought both in his time. Death as a soldier, life as a protector. But here now, with Maria's hand in his and their children's future stretching ahead, he chose life. Again and again, every morning and at the well. Every night in their bed, every moment between, he chose life. And the desert, patient and enduring, bloomed in response. The end came not with drama, but with quiet grace, the way most true endings do. 20 years after Maria first knocked on his door, Jack stood once more at the well. His hair was white now, his hands gnarled with age and work. But his eyes remained clear and his back straight, a soldier's bearing that even time couldn't fully bend. The valley had become everything they dreamed and more. A thriving agricultural center where the railroad, a different company with different values, brought prosperity without exploitation. Their children, 5 in total, had grown strong and capable, carrying on the work of water management with the same integrity their parents had shown. Maria stood beside him, her own hair silver-streaked, but her beauty undiminished. They'd weathered droughts and floods, political changes and personal losses, but always together, always returning to this well where it all began. 43 years, she said softly, her hand finding his. Jack knew what she meant. 43 years since Skeleton Canyon, the same number as those who had died there. A lifetime of building to balance a morning of destruction. Was it enough? He asked, the question he'd carried all these years finally voiced. Did we do enough to make up for what happened? Maria turned him to face the valley, the schools, the farms, the people of all colors and creeds working together. Children playing in streams that hadn't existed before. Families thriving where once only desert sprawled. Look, she said simply, look at what grew from your choosing to say no, from your refusing to be part of evil. Every life here, every drop of shared water, every child who grows up knowing different peoples can live in peace. That's your answer. Jack really looked, and finally, after all these years, felt the last weight of Skeleton Canyon lift from his shoulders. Not erased, it would never be erased, but transformed, made part of a larger story, one where tragedy led to triumph, where isolation led to community, where a well in the desert became the source of 1,000 blooming futures. I love you, he said to Maria, words he'd spoken countless times, but that still carried wonder. Thank you for saving me. Thank you, she replied, for letting yourself be saved. They stood together as the sun set, as they had so many times before. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, it always did. But tonight there was peace. The well remained as it always had and always would. Future generations would draw from it, not knowing the full story of how a broken soldier and a determined woman had fought for its water, for each other, for the right of all people to share in the desert's hidden gifts. But the water would remember. In its cool depths, in its endless flow, the story lived on. A story of redemption and courage of love, found in the unlikeliest place of how sometimes the deepest wounds could become the deepest well sources of strength and healing for all who knew where to look. And always, always the water flowed, patient, persistent, free, as water and love should be.